Welcome, Auvorian subscribers, to the Saturday, November 14th, 2020 software strategy session. Now, keep in mind, guys, in the beginning, there's never any sound because I have the risk disclosure up and/or showing the different developers for their times to give everybody an opportunity to tune in and get everything. I find a lot of times in these meetings, nobody really ever shows up in mass until about 4 or 5 minutes after the top of the hour. So in any case, risk disclosure. Welcome. I know we've got a whole bunch of new subscribers, so please let me know if you can see the risk disclosure screen and also hear my voice as well. Hello from out there. See how fast I can read this. Trading the foreign exchange market carries high risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Trading on margin and utilizing leverage can carry an even higher level of risk and lead to a complete loss of investment funds. Before deciding to trade the foreign exchange market and any other software alert products, you should carefully and diligently consider personal investment objectives, levels of experience, risk tolerance. There's a possibility you could potentially lose the whole account. So please pay attention to my calls. Dasan for Variable, certainly Tyler and Killian for Stratamus, Tyler for Gearbox, all of the software developers. They have their own times, and I highly suggest that as I'm keeping these very brief in the last couple of weeks, in order to give everybody the time since they're in the mode to share the love to their up and down lines and make sure everybody is on these calls, or at the very minimum, which I still don't suggest, just looking at the overview. So I'm going to be posting that once I get everything from the developers. It usually, filters in throughout Saturday. So if you're sharing any of the results from using our software tools or anything in the Facebook groups, please do not use the term company recommended settings. Okay. So AP doesn't have any recommended settings. AP is not a financial advisory firm. They just license software that users can use however they want at their own risk and discretion. Some software does come with out of the box settings that customers have the ability to customize. That's the purpose of these calls. Auvoria has nothing to do with the customer's brokerage account. We can't see it. We can't trade it. We have no idea what the account number is. No brokers are recommended for all the various reasons we've talked about. You guys are probably getting sick of me. I sound like a broken record. But it's important that these risk disclosures are read because, as I've told all the developers and everybody else that are all big team leaders out there, this is a necessary evil. It is important. Please do not give one of our regulators the luxury of building their resume. So any settings that I'm sharing or the developer settings, they're not company recommended settings. It's called essentially for educational purposes only. So let me switch over. Let's take a look at the Forex calendar. Let me know if you can see the Forex calendar as well, please. And make sure we're sharing before, because I have a tendency to get in the zone, as many of you guys know, and then I'm just running off, and everybody's like, hey, where's the screen? All right, here we go. So next week, starting tomorrow, is November 15th through the 21st. Keep in mind, there's a little calendar action. 15th through the 21st. I guess everybody's on daylight savings time around the globe, that they do recognize it already, so we're good there. Starting Sunday, then moving into Monday, Aussie dollar stuff. As you guys can see, RBA. This is the Royal Bank of Australia. Governor Lowe is actually a good guy. Going to be speaking. If anybody's trading anything related to AUD pairs, be on alert. Tuesday, OPEC meetings, which are becoming laughable. And then in the U.S., we've got core retail sales and regular retail sales. Again, notice Tuesday, still AUD. Governor Lowe speaking as well. Okay, some of these events, just like any central bank or a central head banker, he or she speaking globally, can have an effect on the underlying country's currency, which could certainly wag tails for all the pairs that are related to it in trading. So from a conservative versus aggressive stance, just know when these red folder events are. I do get there's a lot of you out there that trade, and there's a lot of software that trades through red folder, but I still think it's important to know. So on Wednesday, we got some Canadian CPI, which hopefully should be a pretty good number. Unemployment changes. So notice we've got a lot of stuff dominating the early part of the week that's AUD related, right? Not a lot of US stuff. Okay, nothing really that major. So all developers of all software are trading next week. Okay, if anybody's got any questions on this Forex Factory, it's forexfactory.com. This is actually one of the best. They are very accurate. I bookmark them, show them, cut and paste them into my notes each weekend as well. So let's take a look at the charts. A lot of people have been asking me about equities, so here we are. Notice we had a little bit of an island reversal. This was early last week, and then we traded within a tight range. I'm really, since the election is up for grabs at this point, I think that a lot of the desks of different traders and folks I've been talking to all week been a lot more plugged in. There's just a lot of uncertainty surrounding outcomes of different stuff. So that would be U.S. Treasury head if a Biden Harris administration gets in, changing around. And notice there was some sniffs or whiffs, if you will, that we actually may see Janet Yellen back in as Treasury Secretary. She used to be the Federal Reserve governor head, as many may recall. She's actually a very smart lady. So I actually think the Treasury Secretary job, if she does get appointed to that cabinet position, would probably be an easier job for her than was running the Fed. So that would be interesting. That's about the only sort of cabinet potential changes if, in fact, the Biden and Harris administration is ratified versus just continuing to be the Trump-Pence administration. So taking a look at that, really don't have a lot. Notice we're inside a tight range in the S&P. Let's switch over to the dollar. Again, still stuck in a tight range. Notice this has been since, what, middle of July? We've arguably put in a really solid base in terms of just bouncing in a tight range. Don't have a lot to comment on this in relation to what I've already talked in spades about over the last 6 months of discussions on, certainly since the middle of July, my ad nauseum discussions of staying inside a base for a period of time. Thus, when a breakout takes place, whether that's higher or lower, we are looking for the break to go lower, that you put in a solid base, right? So that there is more of an argument, if you will, for the dollar to drop. Now, a lot of that could also be predicated upon the fact that we're looking for legislative policymakers in this country and in both the Congress and Senate to potentially pass another stimulus bill. Now that all the election bananas is past us as far as campaigning, they could focus hopefully on putting together a second bill. If in fact that does happen, but there's less of a chance of that happening, the better the numbers continue to look in terms of all release for numbers in this country economically. Okay, so just understand statistically, the odds will drop even if the two sides can get together, quite polarized at this point. The reason that's important to pay attention to is that if we do get a strategy or what's the term I'm looking for, like a package number 2 for bailout, right? It's going to devalue the dollar, and it may take us lower, which we're looking for this thing to sail down to the 85 area. So for those of you, because a lot of people ask, well, why does this matter, Steve? Well, I mean, understanding then technical analysis outside of this, why it matters is if one is trading, Euro US dollar, GBP USD, and anything that's related to the US, right, as a currency major pair, the chances if the dollar drops, all the other currencies related to it in the majors, they're going to go up, and in some cases probably significantly. So I'd be less inclined to step in front of the freight train and start taking shorts on that breakout, these alerts coming through the software, obviously, than I would be taking longs. Okay, because more than likely we'll probably see if that does happen. When, I don't know. We do know it's probably an if. Question is when. But it's just going to be something that is what now appears to be, a quarterly event where there really is no pattern to these breakouts or breakdowns. You just want to be riding their coattails, not fighting against them. This is what caused a lot of drawdowns in accounts in the Einstein Alexander earlier in the spring. Now, in all fairness, even the best out there in currency prediction land, and there's maybe 4 people I put in that category. Ashraf Lottie is a great example. One of them, I actually had a better forecasting record in the spring than he did, and I'm not, like an international currency forecaster. I'm just a knucklehead over here observing charts. So it was difficult for really anybody to get it right. And that's really why it's just critically important that risk management be exercised. You're trading with money you can afford to lose. You're not putting crazy settings on whatever the software is. And that's why I think it's really great of management at Auvoria to have the developers, running their own show. At some point, maybe it'll be a little more integrated with myself once I understand all the software. But everybody at AP's just put in a tremendous amount of effort, especially the lead teams and the developers, and getting everything ironed out pretty quickly. We'll have some more ruffles, obviously, to iron out, but I think we've made some strides big time, to the point where I'm getting dinged constantly in LinkedIn and from people all over the world going, hey, I heard about this, essentially, how do I get involved? So it's good to see the communication of performance is certainly getting out there. So that's the dollar. Keep in mind the Q&A window's open. If you guys want to just put in comments in the Q&A window, put the comments there, not the chat window, please. So look at the melees we're stuck in with Euro USD, right? Beginning to sound a broken record on this one, but we're still in between these support and resistance points. Every time, regardless of where this top resistance point is or the bottom support line, R versus S, okay, it's really served well. Martingale systems will do well in the side of these areas, bouncing in between one versus the other. So, no, I did not, for that question. So whoever came in late, so we started off with red folder. See, would you stay away from trading AUD pairs? So it depends. The question was, would I stay away from trading AUD pairs any week that's fraught with any type of news event? It's going to depend on what kind of software you have. So for those overseas, you may not understand, in the US, regulation's a little tighter. You actually have to accept the trades, which I still disagree with, but we're waiting for a ruling from our new attorneys on that are US based. Frankly, I think that every country should have the ability to have the software act in a lot more, essentially executing the trades for you fashion, versus having to approve. It's just my own personal opinion. I hope I am right. But outside of that, a lot of times when I get asked that question, regardless of the currency pair, the answer I give may seem like I'm kicking the can down the road, but it really just comes from the standpoint that I'm not smarter than the software. Okay. Now there may be a couple of times that all of us that are paying attention may be smarter than the software. And I think that time really only comes when there's a huge break from some long pattern of basing, kind of like what you guys are seeing on the screen right here. So essentially, if we broke lower, right, and you are accepting, give an example, let's say you have a martingale system you're accepting trades from. We broke underneath this 16 area. Arguably, we're going to take a trip probably pretty far. How fast it gets to that point, I don't know. But we're probably going to travel down easily to the low 14 area. If in fact that's the case, it's probably going to come in a fairly quick and protracted move. I mean, do you really want to be fighting the train against that, right? So I just wouldn't be accepting longs that show up while we're progressing down to the next area. The treachery of making that statement to everybody, regardless of the software, is that I'm in this particular instance saying, you know what, I think I am smarter than the software. So maybe somebody out there can statistically figure that out, but I can tell you just from my experience in the spring, had we done that with some of these big moves in all the pairs related to the pandemic, the drawdowns would be a lot lower, because we wouldn't be stepping in front of the train. So that is the only instance that if we're breaking from a pattern, and there is that red folder news event, I would be a lot less interested in taking something that's fighting against a trend. Okay, so that applies to any currency. So just keep that as food for thought. I'm going to try and stick to that theme because the rest of all the other times, I'm not smarter than the software. Thank you, Vlad. Appreciate it, sir. Condolences are appreciated. Boxes of Cuban cigars are better. Peter, I know you can't recommend, but if you were just trading one pair in the coming week in Einstein, it would just be Euro USD. So, I mean, there's 30% of the volume, arguably, in any given day or week is in this main pair. Okay. So, whatever software you guys are using, they all trade Euro USD with the exception of Stratamus. You have the ability to just have it run this one pair. Do understand, though, there certainly is, there's more, how do I describe this without putting my foot in my mouth? There's more anticipations of moves in these main currencies charts because they're watched obviously by a lot more institutions and retail traders around the world than there is any of the miners, right? So that's why I purposely don't get into charting the small stuff. I figured you listen to enough of what I'm looking at. If you really want to get or further into this or teach your teams, just have them set up a trading view account. Stuff's real cheap. And chart it like this. Keep it simple. I don't care what color you make the charts, because I got some questions on the colors that you make the charts are up to you guys, right? You can turn everything purple if you want. The point is just understanding the patterns and the support and resistance levels from a very simplistic standpoint. I could overlay a bazillion of the things, but I would choose to just look at support and resistance for now. That answers the question with a long answer. But good questions, guys. Keep coming. So let's take a look at USD JPY. And then while I'm looking through this and just making comments, if you guys could go into the chart, if you could go into the chat room and just type in what software you're trading. So GB and V if you're trading both, right? If you're trading Iron or Alex and you're trading Variable, just put in an initial. That way I can kind of see where everybody is. I think if I could figure out how to set up a poll in our corporate Auvoria account, which I've had a difficulty getting straightened out. I've enabled polls, but I can't seem to set one up because that's something I do want to continue to take a poll on each Saturday. Who's trading what or all? And arguably, I think that, hopefully as all of our net worth and income levels grow through this process, whether you're, just a customer of AP or an affiliate end customer, is to continue to diversify into other pieces of software. There's going to be weeks where Variable is a great week, right? Or it has an okay week, or maybe it does nothing in a week. That Gearbox, which has had a bunch of great weeks recently, will do well, right? Maybe there's periods of time that those two aren't doing that great, although hard to see how that is going to be the case because they've all done really well. But it's just an argument of diversification, right? So if we go in and buy just Apple Computer and we don't buy Microsoft and we don't buy Google, what if one does much better than the other? I mean, arguably, if you own all three, you have a much broader stance of operating system and software companies on the planet. You own essentially three companies that operate the vast majority of operating systems on this planet, right? So you have more diversification. I use the same argument in softwares. Some will trade different currencies. Where I think it's going to get a bit tricky for us, and we'll have to sort of figure that out, is that, where I think you're bringing in some risk is if you have a couple of different pieces of software, like a Variable and a Gearbox and or an Einstein or Alex, and you're trading all the same currency pair, right? So it's all US. So I'd want to have maybe a little bit, unless it's against the software's expertise in trading it, I would want to have a broad diversification, ideally across all three of those. If the climate's right, maybe trading 4 or 5 different major currency pairs. So that's essentially what I'm looking to develop in a strategy of my own once I can actually put some darn time into this thing. So I'm going to open some more accounts, a couple of corporate accounts. I've got a couple of clients that won't leave me alone about this. I'm waiting for everything to be perfectly ironed out, which probably never happen. We're always updating software, but essentially running quite stable, which they are at this point, is the most important thing. And then I'm just going to broadly diversify out with a number of clients in this area. So, long answer to the question. Let's move to US Yenny. So notice we had a huge rip. This is an importance to why you draw channel charts, which is what this green lines are. We're drawing what's called a downtrend channel, which can serve very good purposes, along with a lot of other reasons, as to why a particular price area holds and it rips back up into the balance area, which we saw right off the bottom at 103. So it's a fairly pronounced area of support. We have arguably a fairly pronounced area of resistance, right up in this area. It'll probably continue unless something breaks majorly in the news front, or some sort of global issue, probably bounce between the two. So that question that Rick asks is a good one. It says, are there any drawdown calculators for the new software? Rick, do you have the variable calculator? Do you have variable installed? Is that what you're trading with? Because Sun has presented a calculator. But if you want maybe a more broader, a more sophisticated calculator in an Excel sheet format, there's a ton of them out there floating around. 4 or 5 of them can be given to you. We cannot, from a management perspective, anybody, especially if we're directly affiliated with management or some sort of advisory role at the company like I am, we cannot disseminate recommendations for brokers or anything that would be construed as performance enhancing. These drawdown or performance calculators can be construed as that. I know it's probably like, well, why can't you just give it out? Again, we don't want to give any of the regulators the luxury of building their resume, right? So just remember that. Developers are trading this week, Sean. All right. Any other questions on anything? So we're at about a half an hour at this point, 20 minutes, maybe like 20 minutes. I got some more time if anybody's got any questions. So let's take a look here. If you guys didn't vote, please vote. Variable, Alex, Einstein, or Gearbox. What are you trading? So we got some Gearboxes, some variables, about 50-50 for both. Some Alex, some Einstein, variable and Einstein, variable and Gear. A little bit of both. I'm loving the diversification, by the way, guys. Very nice. By the way, if you want to get more software licenses for free, just go find a bunch of people and put them underneath you. It's really not that tough. The more these performance returns continue to get better, guys, the more that, and I never thought that I'd do this, but like a whole bunch of my trading buddies have gotten a whiff of what I'm doing, and they won't leave me alone about this stuff. So I basically just sent out a huge email to about 6 or 7 trader buddies, and half of them have signed up already. Right? Never thought I'd build a downline until I found this company. So, all right. So it looks like we're both. That's great. Okay, so the specific questions from Dasan is running NZD CHF. When I looked for it in the symbol says pro after the symbol. Is that okay? I don't know the answer to that question, Ron. If you want, I can copy that question and shoot it out to Dasan. Let me just do that. I hate how you can't copy from the chat window. It just drives me nuts. Let me try and manually copy. See if that works. All right, so I think I'm being successful. Do me a favor, Ron. Can you send me an email with that question? It's svetteral@auvoriaprime.com. Just send me an email with that question. What I'll do is I'll just forward it to Dasan. Since one of the things when you close down Zoom, the whole chat window goes away. I can't get a record of the chat. It's probably a way to do this, but nobody I've asked has successfully answered the question. So if you want to surprise me and answer, that'd be great. All right. So question from Mark as a suggestion. The time to change software should be made to a time after the weekly calls for each software. Then we can determine our strategies better and still have time to change our software we're using. Instead of Friday, make it into the day Saturday so that we can listen to all these calls. Mark, send that, because I don't feel like typing all this up. Just send me an email with that and I'll forward it to the executive suggestions. I'm pretty sure somewhere, and maybe somebody can post that in the chat window, there's a place for feedback in the back office, if I'm not mistaken. Please tell me if I'm wrong on this. Don't know the finance of that. Back office, you can make these suggestions, guys. These do get heard. I do know that. So if we have, here's the email address. It's svetteral, VETTorial, at AuvoriaPrime.com. If you have any questions related to strategy or you want me to take a closer look at your accounts, I do need you to hook it up to my FX book, please. No whining, just do it and make sure it's verified with the double green check marks and that everything's unlocked so that I can see what the window looks like. So the best way to know if you're unlocked in terms of information you're sharing is to log out of my FX book after you've generated the link I should see, and then click on the link. It'll tell you whether or not you can see it as the full, and then along with the screenshot of the settings. Now, much of the gearbox and the variable settings, I don't have memorized like the developers do. That's why I'm really sort of pushing everybody to those calls as I've been doing. You know, a lot of those calls, for that matter, a lot of these calls that I do, you guys don't have to be watching the video. You could just open up your phone. This is certainly a reason to have a much better phone. I'll tell you, I've always had junky phones, but I just bought a Samsung S20, and the thing is just absolute bomb, especially in terms of multitasking. So plus the camera shoots like I'm actually going to hook up here so you guys can see real soon. I'm going to get a camera going inside the office. You can see my ugly face every Saturday. But you can listen to the calls. They're recorded without having to watch them. See when you're driving around your car. All right, cool. So there's my email in the chat. What am I missing? I do like that suggestion, Mark. You email that to me. Somebody said NZDCHF is there. So Stratamus, I haven't gotten any. I know our whole corporate team and our owners were all in a weekend retreat, getting a lot of things hatched out. I don't know where we are with Stratamus onboarding with Killian Software. He's over in the Far East, by the way. So good guy, and I'm looking forward to taking a closer look at it, but I don't know when it's going to be onboarded. GBP CAD for the next week. Generally, GBP pairs is the question from Tom. Not sure what you're asking. Let's take a look at GBP USD though. So notice we're still stuck in the same thing. This chart looks very similar to the Euro USD. See when I flip between these two charts, they look similar. Exact same advice going on with this. The only difference is between these two, that 200-day line is much closer to the bottom of this. So it may be more difficult to get underneath the 27 area, which is looking like a raging floor at this point as far as support. 27 area. If it breaks below this and anything significant, And one other thing, let me see if I can grab the drawing tool here. Hmm. What the hell's a drawing tool in this damn software? That's one thing I miss about some of the other ones. You could just grab the highlighter. So I'll just I'll just circle the area right here. Whenever you're looking at a pattern like this, or the Euro USD, you can just assume that since it's just been so much trading for such a while inside of a very tight range, there are pockets of stops that are building up right in the big areas, like right in here, okay, right up above here. The more we spend in that area, the more people are getting confident in their trades that they're putting in stops that are a bit out down in many of these areas of more extended support or resistance. What happens, especially in equities and futures lands, to a lesser degree in Forex, is a lot of the algorithms from an institutional standpoint, they're looking for this. They're what's called stop hunter algos. And a lot of these stop hunter algos will be looking for huge pockets of stops. And then they'll go in and just power it up to a given area. So as I say, don't be a victim. And a lot of this really more applies to manual trading, but I think it'll give you a better perspective of how to look at a chart. If you just look and sort of envision where you think pockets of stops would be, either above or below whatever pattern you're looking at, in any market for that matter, it helps have a better understanding. But the longer time you spend balancing inside of an area and you really are getting the ship overloaded to one side or the other, it's going to tip. It's just a matter of when. So they'll go up and blast all the stops out in a given area, which is tough for almost any software to shine unless it's a trend break type of algorithm, right? Which they are out there, especially in futures land. It's tougher, right? Okay, so his call didn't happen today. I'd grant Killian, quite frankly, a little more of a wider net, guys. He's got some work to do, from what I understand. And who knows? I hope I'm wrong. I hope everything just goes live real quick. But do know that as good as Stratamus is, it trades one currency pair. Okay, that's it. So from a risk standpoint, there's no adjustments to be made there. But from a diversification standpoint, I think especially if you're just with Stratamus, it behooves you, especially in that particular case, to have another piece of software in addition to it from a diversification standpoint. All right, so nobody else has got any other questions? Everybody have a great week. If you don't see the email, I just posted it, but it's svettorial, VETTORIL, at avoriaprime.com. I wish everybody a fantastic week. Let your up and down lines know of these recordings. Make sure everybody, that'd be like the first thing whenever we talk to our team, the first thing we ask everybody, and we're pretty brutal about this, is, did you guys go through the calls for your software? No, we didn't. Why not? So, it's almost like, they have to prove they've gone through the calls. And I think that's just going to help everybody feel a lot more confident about, putting larger amounts of dollars in once you've gone through a period of demo. So everybody have a great week. Any questions, send me an email. May the trades be with you. Federal, off the mic.